The alien girl in chains. The lights in the massive circus arena flashed bright, filling the space with a mix of colors. Thousands of spectators from different planets cheered, their voices echoing through the dome. A giant holoscreen displayed the next attraction in bold letters. The Wild Beast, from DE Unknown. Ethan stood in the shadows behind the stage, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He had been working as a mechanic for this traveling space circus for 2 years. His job was to fix machines, clean up after the shows, and stay out of trouble. He never liked how the circus treated its creatures. But he had no choice. He needed the money. But tonight, something felt different. A deep drumbeat echoed through the arena. The crowd fell silent. The floor beneath them shook as a large cage rolled into the center of the stage. Inside, locked in thick steel bars, was a creature unlike any Ethan had seen before. She had dark blue skin, long silver hair, and glowing golden eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Heavy metal chains were wrapped around her arms and legs. A thick collar, blinking with red lights, was locked around her neck. She looked weak, her body covered in scars. The ringmaster, a tall man with a cruel smile, stepped forward. His red and gold coat shimmered under the lights as he raised a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted, his voice filled with excitement. "Behold, the wild beast from a forbidden world. A creature so dangerous, so untamed, that she can only be controlled with the strongest chains. Watch as she performs tricks like a true animal." The crowd roared with excitement, but Ethan felt something else: disgust. The ringmaster pressed a button on his remote, sending a shock through the creature's collar. She flinched, her muscles tightening in pain. The crowd laughed. Ethan's fists clenched. This wasn't entertainment. This was torture. The ringmaster shouted commands, and the girl obeyed. She jumped through burning hoops, climbed a tall tower, and balanced on a thin wire. Every time she slowed down, another shock hit her, forcing her to move. Ethan watched closely. Something was wrong. She wasn't acting like an animal. There was intelligence in her eyes, a hidden pain. Then, for just a second, her gaze met his. She didn't snarl or growl like a beast. She didn't show anger or rage. Instead, she looked at him with something else, pleading. "Help me." The words weren't spoken, but Ethan felt them deep inside. His heart pounded. He had seen many creatures in this circus, but none of them had looked at him like that. None of them had asked for help. The show continued, but Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. Finally, the ringmaster ended the performance with a grand wave of his arms. "Give it up for the wild beast." The audience cheered as the cage rolled away, disappearing behind the stage. Ethan knew where they were taking her, deep into the lower decks of the circus ship, where no one but the trainers and guards were allowed. His hands trembled. He had to know more. That night, when most of the crew had gone to sleep, Ethan walked quietly through the metal corridors. He moved past the empty food stalls, the dark hallways, and finally reached the restricted area. His heart raced. If he was caught here, the ringmaster would throw him into space without hesitation. The air smelled of oil, rust, and something worse: fear. He reached a large steel door marked Cargo, High Security. It was slightly open. Carefully, he peeked inside. The room was filled with cages, each one holding strange creatures from different galaxies. Some growled, others whimpered. But in the center of the room was the biggest cage of all, the one holding her. The alien girl was lying on the cold metal floor, her chains still locked. Her chest moved up and down slowly, her body exhausted. Ethan stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. Then, suddenly, her eyes snapped open. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ethan wasn't sure if she would attack or scream, but she did neither. Instead, her lips moved. He barely heard it, but the word sent chills down his spine. "Help. Me?" Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She could speak. Not in an alien language, not in strange noises. She spoke his language. His mind raced. What had the circus done to her? What kind of creature was she? Before he could say anything, a deep voice growled from behind him. "What are you doing here?" Ethan froze. The ringmaster stood in the doorway, his sharp eyes locked onto him. His hand rested on the control panel, ready to send a shock through the girl's collar. A slow, wicked smile spread across his face. "I warned you, boy," he said. "You shouldn't stick your nose where it doesn't belong." Ethan knew he was in trouble, but more than that, he knew something else. This wasn't just a trapped alien. She was a prisoner. And now, so was he, a silent plea for help. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he faced the ringmaster. The dim red glow of the security lights flickered against the metallic walls, casting long shadows. He could hear the hum of the ship's engines beneath his feet, but the sound was drowned out by the thundering beat of his own pulse. The ringmaster, a tall, gaunt man with piercing eyes, took a step closer. His boots clicked against the floor, slow and deliberate. He tilted his head slightly, his cruel smile widening. "I warned you, boy," he said, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "Curiosity is dangerous on this ship." Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. He needed an excuse, anything to get out of this situation. I was just checking the cage locks," he lied quickly. "Saw a warning light on the system earlier. Thought I should make sure everything was secure." The ringmaster studied him for a moment, then let out a low chuckle. "Is that so?" He ran his fingers over the control panel, his thumb hovering over the red button that activated the shock collar. The alien girl in the cage flinched at the sight of it, her breathing shallow, her golden eyes darting between Ethan and the ringmaster. Ethan clenched his fists. He had seen enough. The girl was terrified, not because she was an animal, but because she understood exactly what was happening. The ringmaster pressed the button. A sharp, inhuman cry filled the room as electricity coursed through the girl's body. She convulsed, her fingers clawing at the floor as she gasped in pain. Ethan's stomach turned. "Don't pity her," the ringmaster said, watching Ethan's reaction with amusement. "She's nothing but a beast. A trick, a showpiece, and if you're smart, you'll remember that." The girl's breathing was ragged, but she didn't break eye contact with Ethan. Something burned behind her pain, something deeper. The ringmaster sighed, turning away as if he had lost interest. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," he said, "but don't let me catch you here again. Now get out." Ethan hesitated, glancing at the girl one last time. Her lips parted slightly. "Please." The whisper was barely audible, but Ethan heard it. He forced himself to walk away, his hand shaking as he exited the cargo hold. The door slid shut behind him with a heavy clang, locking the girl inside once more. The truth beneath the chains. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. He lay on his small bunk, staring at the metal ceiling of his cramped quarters. The ship creaked softly as it drifted through space, but his mind was racing. That girl, she spoke English. The circus always claimed their wild beasts were mindless creatures, unable to think beyond their instincts. But she had spoken, even through the pain. She had looked at him not with the empty eyes of a broken animal, but with the desperation of someone who still had hope. Ethan sat up, rubbing his hands over his face. He knew what he had to do. He had to find out the truth. The next night, when the ship was silent, Ethan made his move. He had spent the day studying the security system, noting the patterns of the guards and the blind spots in the cameras. Now, moving as quietly as possible, he slipped back into the restricted cargo area. The dim emergency lighting gave everything a blood-red glow. The cages were silent except for the occasional rustle of movement. He reached the alien girl's cage. She was sitting in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees. The chain still bound her wrists. The collar still blinked on her neck. When she saw him, her golden eyes widened. She pressed herself against the bars, gripping them with trembling fingers. Ethan knelt down, keeping his voice low. "Can you understand me?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. His breath caught in his throat. "What's your name?" She struggled to form the words. Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't spoken in years. "Saran." Ethan repeated it. "Saran." The name felt strange on his tongue, but it was hers. It wasn't beast or creature. It was her name. "Where are you from?" he asked. Saran frowned, as if trying to remember. She touched the collar around her neck, wincing slightly. "They took it away," she whispered. "My memories, my voice." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She shook her head. "Drugs. Chemicals. They made me forget." Ethan's stomach twisted. He had heard rumors before about how the circus controlled its creatures. If an animal was too wild, too intelligent, they drugged it into submission. But this wasn't just any creature. Saran wasn't an animal at all. She had been made into one. A desperate plan. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He had always hated the way the circus treated its captives. But this was worse than he had ever imagined. He couldn't leave her here. "I'm going to help you," he said firmly. Saran's eyes widened. "You will?" Ethan nodded. "But I need to know something first." He swallowed. "What are you?" She hesitated, lowering her gaze. "I don't remember everything," she admitted. "But I know. I am not a beast." Ethan already knew that. But there was something else. The way the ringmaster was so desperate to keep her locked up. The way she had been drugged. There was something about Saran that the circus didn't want anyone to know. A deep voice suddenly echoed from the hallway outside. "Who's in there?" Ethan's blood ran cold. Footsteps. Heavy boots. Getting closer. Saran's breath hitched. She shrank back into the shadows of her cage, her fingers trembling. Ethan's mind raced. If they found him here, they'd kill them. If they caught him helping her, she'd never get another chance at freedom. He had to think fast. The door handle turned. Ethan only had seconds to make a decision. He looked at Saran. "Do you trust me?" She hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. That was all he needed. The door began to slide open. Ethan grabbed a metal rod from the nearby supply rack. And then, before the guard could react, he struck. The escape plan begins. The impact was hard and fast. Ethan swung the metal rod with all his strength, striking the guard just as the door slid open. The heavy-set man grunted, stumbling backward, his helmeted head slamming against the metal wall with a dull thud. Ethan barely had time to breathe before the guard reached for his blaster. Not good. With quick reflexes, Ethan threw himself forward, slamming his shoulder into the man's chest. They tumbled onto the cold steel floor, the blaster skidding away. "Saran," Ethan shouted. "Help." For a moment, she didn't move. Her glowing golden eyes flickered between Ethan and the struggling guard. Then something inside her seemed to snap. Despite the chains around her wrists, she lunged toward the bars of her cage. Her fingers curled around them, and with a sharp intake of breath, she pulled. The reinforced steel groaned. Sparks flew as the security locks strained against her unnatural strength. The veins on her arms glowed faintly, something stirring deep within her, something that had been suppressed. The locks snapped. The door of the cage flung open. The guard barely had time to react before Saran rushed forward. She moved fast, a blur of blue and silver. Even in her weakened state, she was faster than any human Ethan had ever seen. With a sharp, effortless motion, she struck the guard across the chest. The force sent him flying into the opposite wall, knocking him out cold. Ethan stared. His heart pounded in his chest. Saran stood over the unconscious guard, her breath heavy, her fists clenched. The dim red lights cast eerie shadows across her face. For a moment, Ethan wondered if she was going to turn on him. But then she looked at him, something like uncertainty in her expression. I didn't mean to." Ethan shook his head quickly. No, no. You did good. We need to get out of here. Now. Zuran glanced at the guard again, then nodded. Ethan hurried to the control panel near the door and pulled up the security feed. His hands moved quickly, scanning the ship's schematics. The circus ship was a massive floating city, filled with cages, arenas, and living quarters for the crew. The outer docking bay was their best chance at escape, but it was heavily guarded. They needed a different way out. Come on, he whispered, motioning for Zuran to follow. She hesitated. Ethan turned back. What? Her golden eyes flickered toward the cages around them, the other prisoners. Ethan's stomach twisted. He wanted to help them. He hated what this circus did, but freeing everyone would take time they didn't have. Zuran looked at him, silent but pleading. Ethan clenched his jaw. We get out first, he said firmly. Then we come back for them. She didn't like it, but she nodded. And they ran. Through the belly of the beast, the ship's metal corridors stretched out endlessly before them, twisting and turning like a labyrinth. The low hum of the engines vibrated beneath their feet. Ethan knew the security system well. He had spent years fixing it, working on the cameras, repairing the electrified doors. That knowledge was the only reason they were still alive. He led Zuran through maintenance tunnels, avoiding the main pathways. The ship's eye-controlled cameras swept back and forth in predictable patterns, giving them just enough time to slip past undetected. Zuran moved with unnatural grace, her steps silent. She was still weak, but Ethan could tell, whatever had been done to her, it hadn't erased her instincts. They stopped near an intersection where two corridors met. Ethan peeked around the corner. Two guards, armed, talking casually, unaware of the fugitives sneaking through the ship. Ethan pulled Zuran back. We can't fight them. Not without weapons. Zuran studied the guards. Then, before Ethan could stop her, she reached up to her collar and pressed her fingers against it. A strange energy pulsed around her hand. The red lights on the collar flickered. Ethan's eyes widened. What are you? A small click sounded. The collar snapped open. Zuran took a slow breath as the heavy metal ring fell to the floor with a clang. She shuddered. And then, for the first time, she stood up straight. Ethan had thought she was tall before. But now, without the weight of the chains, without the forced hunch in her posture, she looked regal, like a warrior who had been kept in the dark for far too long. Zuran rolled her shoulders, testing her movement. A faint glow spread across her skin, just beneath the surface, like something waking up after a long sleep. Ethan swallowed hard. She wasn't human. She wasn't even clothes. And now, she wasn't bound anymore. She turned to him. Let me handle this. Ethan didn't argue. Zuran stepped forward. Her movements were calm, measured. She walked into the hallway, straight toward the guards. They noticed her immediately. Hey. One of them raised a blaster. He never got the chance to fire. Zuran moved. In the blink of an eye, she was in front of them. One guard went flying before he could react. The second tried to draw his weapon, but she caught his wrist and twisted, just enough to make him drop it. She grabbed the blaster before it hit the ground. One fluid motion. She aimed. She fired. A bolt of energy hit the security panel beside them, sending sparks flying. The alarm system powered down just before it could activate. The second guard collapsed, unconscious. Ethan stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Zuran turned back to him. We need to move, she said simply. Ethan finally snapped out of his daze and nodded. Yeah, okay. They took the weapons from the fallen guards and kept going. The escape plan had officially begun. A secret the circus never wanted to get out. As they ran, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about what he had just seen. Zuran had been drugged when they captured her, weakened, but even in that state, she was faster and stronger than any human. Now that the collar was gone, what else was she capable of? He didn't have time to ask. They were near the lower docking bay when Ethan pulled Xiran aside into a small maintenance room. He locked the door behind them and pulled up a holographic map of the ship. "We're close," he whispered. "The docking bay is just past those security doors." Xiran nodded, still catching her breath. "What's the plan?" Ethan hesitated. The ship's crew had to know something was wrong by now. They had only minutes before the alarm reached the higher levels. If they were going to escape, it had to be now. Ethan looked at Xiran. He didn't know much about her. He didn't know what she was, or what had been done to her. But he knew one thing. She deserved to be free. "We fight our way through," he said. Xiran's golden eyes gleamed. "Then let's finish this." The great circus heist. The air inside the maintenance room was thick with tension. The ship's emergency lights flickered a deep red, signaling that something was wrong. Ethan and Xiran stood over the holographic map of the ship. The docking bay, their escape route, was less than 500 meters away. But between them and freedom stood two massive security doors, a squad of heavily armed guards, and worst of all, the ringmaster himself. Ethan took a deep breath. "We need a distraction." Xiran tilted her head. "A distraction?" Ethan nodded. "If we try to fight through them head-on, we'll be dead in seconds. We need to draw them away, make them focus on something else." Xiran's golden eyes flickered with understanding. "The other prisoners." Ethan hesitated. "Yeah, but if we open those cages, there's no controlling what happens next." Xiran looked at him with quiet intensity. "That is the point." Ethan exhaled sharply. "All right," he muttered. "Let's make some chaos." Releasing the beasts. They moved quickly through the dimly lit corridors, their stolen weapons gripped tightly in their hands. The cargo hold, where all the creatures were kept, was just a few doors away. Ethan hacked into the security system using an access panel, overriding the digital locks. A soft beep confirmed that the door was unlocked. Xiran placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay behind me." Ethan wanted to argue, but he knew better. Instead, he nodded and let her take the lead. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, row after row of cages stretched across the massive cargo bay. Creatures of all shapes and sizes sat in the darkness, their eyes reflecting the dim emergency lights. Some were small, hunched figures with leathery skin. Others were massive, hulking beasts with sharp claws and glowing eyes. But all of them had one thing in common. They were trapped. Xiran stepped forward, her expression unreadable. Her fingers brushed against the nearest cage. A creature inside, something that looked like a hybrid of a wolf and a reptile, whimpered at her touch. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He had spent years in this circus, watching these creatures suffer. He had always told himself there was nothing he could do. But now he had a chance to set things right. Ethan activated the master control panel and typed in a sequence of commands, unlocking all cages in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Click. A sound like 100 locks snapping open echoed through the chamber. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low growl rumbled through the air. A massive four-legged beast stepped out of its cage, its glowing eyes scanning its surroundings. Another creature, covered in metallic armor-like scales, stretched its limbs for the first time in years. And then, chaos. The creatures realized they were free. Roars, screeches, and howls filled the air as they surged forward, tearing through the metal barriers that had confined them for so long. Some leaped onto the walls, climbing with unnatural speed. Others charged toward the exit, their instinct driving them to escape. The security alarms blared. Ethan turned to Xiran. "Time to move." She nodded. "Let's go." A war inside the ship. The first wave of guards arrived just as Ethan and Xiran slipped out of the cargo bay. The soldiers were armed with plasma rifles, their faces set in grim determination. They weren't expecting an army of angry, vengeful creatures charging toward them. The first guard managed to fire a single shot before a massive, scaled beast slammed into him, sending him crashing into a wall. Another guard screamed as a tentacled creature wrapped around his legs, pulling him into the darkness. The chaos was complete. Ethan and Saran sprinted through the corridors, using the confusion to their advantage. "This is working," Ethan panted as they turned a corner. "For now," Saran muttered. They reached the final security door leading to the docking bay. It was massive, reinforced with heavy steel and advanced locking mechanisms. Ethan quickly accessed the control panel, trying to override the system. His fingers flew across the keys. Come on, come on." Behind them, the sound of fighting intensified. The creatures were overwhelming the guards, but more reinforcements were on the way. Ziran tensed. "We don't have much time." The security panel beeped. "Access denied." Ethan cursed. "They've locked it down from the control center." Ziran's eyes darkened. She stepped forward and placed both hands on the steel door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft, golden glow pulsed from her fingertips. The air around her shimmered, warping slightly. The steel groaned. Ethan stepped back as a deep vibration filled the air. With a sudden, ear-splitting crack, the massive security door ripped itself apart. The metal twisted and bent like it was made of paper, revealing the docking bay beyond. Ethan's mouth fell open. Ziran staggered slightly, breathing heavily. "Let's go." Ethan shook himself out of his shock and nodded. "Right." They rushed forward, only to come face to face with the last person Ethan wanted to see. The ringmaster. The final showdown. The ringmaster stood in the middle of the docking bay, surrounded by a dozen elite guards. His long red coat billowed slightly as he smirked. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "I must say, you two certainly know how to make a mess." Ziran stepped forward, her expression unreadable. The ringmaster's eyes flickered toward her. "Ah, my dear Ziran, I see you've finally broken your chains." He chuckled. "A shame. You were such a good little pet." Ethan clenched his fists. "She's not your pet, you sick bastard." The ringmaster sighed. "And here I thought you were smarter than this, Ethan. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? This circus is the greatest show in the galaxy. We make history here. We tame the untamable." His smile darkened. "And you think I'm just going to let you take my prize and walk away?" He snapped his fingers. The guards raised their weapons. Ethan's mind raced. They were outnumbered. They had no cover. This was it. Ziran exhaled slowly, her golden eyes locked onto the ringmaster. "No," she said softly. The air around her shifted. And then she moved. Faster than the eye could follow, she launched forward. The first guard didn't even have time to react before she slammed into him, knocking him unconscious in a single blow. The second guard fired, but Ziran twisted, dodging the blast effortlessly. Ethan grabbed a blaster and dove behind a crate, firing at the nearest enemy. A bolt of energy struck a fuel tank, igniting a small explosion. The docking bay erupted into chaos. The ringmaster growled, his smirk vanishing. Enough of this. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black device. Ziran's eyes widened. "No." The ringmaster pressed the button. A pulse of energy shot through the air, and suddenly, Ziran collapsed. Ethan's blood ran cold. "Ziran," she gasped, clutching her head as a strange energy crackled around her body. The ringmaster grinned. "Did you really think I didn't have a backup plan?" Ethan gritted his teeth. They were running out of time. And Ziran was in trouble, breaking the chains. Ziran's scream echoed through the docking bay. The pulse from the ringmaster's device sent crackling energy through her body, forcing her to her knees. Her fingers clawed at the air, her muscles twitching as if an invisible force was pressing her down. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "What the hell did you do to her?" he shouted. The ringmaster chuckled, twirling the small black device between his fingers. Oh, don't look so surprised, Ethan. You didn't really think I'd let my greatest attraction escape so easily, did you? Ethan's grip tightened on his stolen blaster. Let her go. The ringmaster sighed. You still don't understand, do you? He took a slow step forward, his cold eyes locking onto Ethan. She's not just some alien. She's an investment, a miracle of nature, something this galaxy has never seen before. You really think I'd let her slip through my fingers? Ziran struggled against the unseen force holding her down, her glowing golden eyes filled with agony. Sparks flickered along her skin, her body rejecting whatever was happening. But she was too weak to fight it off completely. Ethan had to do something. He glanced around the docking bay. Chaos still raged in the background. Freed creatures fighting guards, fire spreading from the earlier explosion, sirens blaring. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, it was just him, Ziran, and the monster in front of them. The ringmaster smiled. You know, Ethan, you've always been smart. But this, he gestured toward Ziran. This was a mistake. Ethan clenched his jaw. Yeah. Well, I'm about to make another one. Before the ringmaster could react, Ethan shot the device in his hand. The blast struck true. Sparks erupted from the control unit, and the ringmaster let out a surprised shout as it exploded in his palm. Ziran gasped, collapsing fully to the ground as the pulse holding her vanished. The ringmaster snarled. His burned hand curled into a fist, his usual smugness replaced by cold, seething rage. You just made your last mistake, boy. Ethan barely had time to react before the ringmaster reached into his coat and pulled out a second device, a sleek, metallic cylinder. He pressed a button. A mech suit unfolded around him in an instant. Ethan's stomach dropped. The ringmaster's red and gold coat was now covered by thick, reinforced armor. His arms extended into mechanical gauntlets crackling with energy, and a curved visor dropped over his face, glowing with data readouts. Oh, you are so screwed, Ethan muttered. The ringmaster lunged. Ethan barely dodged as a massive metal fist slammed into the ground where he had been standing, leaving a crater in the steel floor. He scrambled backward, firing his blaster, but the energy bolts bounced harmlessly off the mech's armored plating. This wasn't a fight he could win alone. He turned toward Ziran, only to see her slowly rising to her feet. The flickering golden energy around her skin had intensified. Her pupils had shrunk into thin slits, like a predator's. Her breathing was slow, controlled. And for the first time, she didn't look like a prisoner. She looked like something far more. Ethan started. She didn't even glance at him. Instead, she took a single step forward. The floor beneath her cracked. The ringmaster paused, as if sensing something had changed. His visor flickered, scanning her. What? Then Ziran vanished. Or at least, that's what it looked like. 1 second, she was standing there. The next, she was directly in front of the ringmaster, her hand slamming against his mech with enough force to dent the armor. The impact sent him skidding backward. The ringmaster growled. So the beast still has some bite. He swung a metal fist. Ziran caught it. Ethan's eyes widened. The mech whined in protest, servos screeching as Ziran crushed the metal plating in her grip. The ringmaster let out a surprised grunt, struggling against her strength. Ziran's golden eyes burned. I am not your beast. And then she ripped the mech's arm off. The ringmaster let out a roar of pain as sparks flew. He staggered backward, clutching the broken stump where his weaponized gauntlet had been. Ziran wasn't done. She leaped, moving faster than any human could react. She landed on the mech's chest, grabbing the ringmaster's helmet. You are nothing but a parasite, she hissed. The ringmaster struggled. Wait. Ziran tore the helmet off, revealing his panicked face underneath. Then she threw him. The ringmaster's body crashed into a pile of wreckage, the remains of his mech sparking around him. He groaned, trying to push himself up, but it was clear he had lost. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Ziran turned back to him. For the first time, she smiled. Ethan chuckled. That was insane. Ziran tilted her head. You're welcome. Ethan glanced at the ringmaster, who was barely conscious. What do we do with him? Ziran stepped forward, raising a hand. For a second, Ethan thought she was going to finish him off. But instead, she turned to one of the freed creatures nearby. A massive winged beast with sharp talons and reptilian eyes. She placed a hand on its head. It rumbled in understanding. Then, without another word, the beast picked up the ringmaster in its claws and carried him away, into the chaos of the ship. Ethan whistled. That's poetic. Ziran turned back to him. Come, we must leave. Ethan nodded. They sprinted toward the nearest escape pod. The docking bay was in ruins, but there was still one intact pod, just big enough for the two of them. They climbed inside, sealing the hatch. Ethan activated the controls. Hold on. The pod launched from the ship, blasting into the cold void of space. Through the small window, Ethan watched as the circus ship burned, fires consuming its twisted legacy. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. He turned to Ziran. So, he said, where to next? Ziran gazed at the stars. To find my people, she said, and to make sure this never happens again. Ethan smirked. Sounds like an adventure. Ziran's golden eyes glowed in the dim light. Yes, she said softly. And it's only just beginning. The battle for freedom. The escape pod hurtled through space, leaving the burning wreckage of the circus ship behind. Ethan sat back in his seat, exhaling a shaky breath. His heart was still racing from everything that had just happened. Ziran, seated across from him, was silent. The soft glow in her golden eyes had dimmed slightly, but the intensity remained. They were free. For the first time in years, Ziran wasn't trapped behind bars, wasn't being shocked into obedience, wasn't being treated like an animal. And yet, the fight wasn't over. Ethan turned to the pod's control panel, pulling up the navigation system. All right, let's figure out where we're going. A holographic map flickered to life, displaying nearby star systems. Most were barren, uninhabited stretches of space, but one caught Ethan's attention. A small moon orbiting a gas giant, marked as a neutral trading post. That's our best bet, he said, pointing. We can land, refuel, and figure out our next move. Ziran's gaze remained fixed on the stars. We are not safe yet. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Ziran turned to him. They will come. A cold chill ran down his spine. She was right. The circus ship may have been destroyed, but the ringmaster had connections. He wasn't just some random businessman. He was part of a network, a galaxy-spanning empire built on the suffering of enslaved beings. They wouldn't just let their prized attraction escape. They would come for her. And for him. Ethan clenched his jaw. Then we'd better be ready. The hunt begins. As the escape pod neared the trading post, Ethan kept a close eye on the scanners. So far, there were no signs of pursuit. But that didn't mean they weren't being watched. The trading post itself was a floating station tethered to the surface of a dusty moon. It wasn't much, just a collection of docking bays, supply depots, and rundown taverns, a perfect place to disappear. As the pod touched down, Ziran hesitated. Ethan noticed. You all right? She frowned slightly, flexing her fingers. I have never been in a place like this. Ethan blinked. Wait, what do you mean? Ziran looked away. Before the circus, I do not remember much. Only my planet. Only my people. Ethan's stomach twisted. The circus had drugged her, experimented on her, erased parts of her past. How much had they stolen from her? He placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll find out who you are. I promise. Ziran met his gaze. She nodded. Together, they stepped out of the pod and into the unknown. Shadows in the dark. The air inside the trading post was thick with smoke and the scent of oil. Ethan led the way, keeping his head down. Ziran followed close behind, her golden eyes scanning the unfamiliar world. They needed supplies, a new ship, a way to stay ahead of whatever bounty hunters were no doubt already looking for them. Ethan approached a merchant, an old reptilian trader with 3 cybernetic arms. "We need a ship." The merchant glanced at him, then at Ziran. His slit-pupil eyes narrowed. "I don't deal with fugitives," he rasped. Ethan's fingers twitched toward his blaster. "We're just travelers." The merchant snorted. "Sure you are." Before Ethan could argue, Ziran stepped forward. "I need information," she said, her voice steady. "About my people." The merchant hesitated. His eyes flickered to her glowing golden ones. Ethan saw something shift in the old trader's expression. Recognition. He knew something. The merchant leaned forward. "You don't even know what you are, do you?" Ziran tensed. "Tell me." The merchant exhaled slowly. "Your kind. They were wiped out, hunted to extinction." Ziran's breath caught. Ethan's fists clenched. "By who?" The merchant hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "The ringmasters." Ethan's blood ran cold. Ziran's hands curled into fists. "They came to your planet." The merchant continued, "Took your people, turned them into weapons, into slaves." His reptilian eyes flickered toward her collar. Though now broken, it still hung loosely around her neck. "You are not the first, and you won't be the last." Silence. Ziran took a slow breath. "Where are they?" The merchant hesitated. Then he shook his head. "No one knows. The ringmasters operate in the shadows. Their buyers are the wealthiest in the galaxy, hidden behind 1,000 layers of secrecy." Ethan's mind raced. This was bigger than just one circus. This was an empire, and they had just declared war on it. Ziran exhaled. "Then we find them." Ethan nodded. "And we burn them down." The merchant let out a dry laugh. "You two are insane." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, well, it's kind of our thing." The first target. They didn't have to wait long for trouble to find them. As they left the marketplace, Ethan's instincts prickled. He caught a flicker of movement from the rooftops above, a shadow shifting in the artificial twilight. They were being followed. Ziran noticed too. "How many?" Ethan didn't look directly. 3. No, 4. Maybe more. A low hum filled the air. Then, a shot rang out. Ziran moved before Ethan could react. She grabbed his arm and pulled him behind cover just as a sniper bolt struck the ground where he had been standing. Ethan swore. "Damn it, they're fast." Ziran narrowed her eyes. "We're faster." The bounty hunters moved in. A group of 6 figures, clad in sleek, black armor, surrounded them. Their weapons hummed with lethal energy. One of them, a tall, insectoid alien with 4 arms, stepped forward. "The bounty on you is high, girl." His mandibles clicked. "Make this easy." Ziran stared him down. "I am not easy." Ethan smirked. "She's really not." The bounty hunter growled. "Kill the human. Take the girl alive." Big mistake. Before the first shot was fired, Ziran moved. One moment, she was standing beside Ethan. The next, she was behind the bounty hunter, her glowing hands gripping his arms. A sickening crack echoed through the alley. The bounty hunter collapsed. The others hesitated. Then all hell broke loose. Blaster fire lit up the alley as Ethan rolled into cover, returning shots with deadly precision. Ziran weaved through the chaos, moving faster than any of them could track. She struck hard, her blows cracking armor, breaking bones. She wasn't just fighting. She was unleashing. The last bounty hunter tried to flee. Ziran grabbed him by the throat. "Tell me," she said, "who sent you?" The bounty hunter choked, clawing at her grip. "Teed the ringmaster," he gasped. Not dead. She's coming for you. Zuran's golden eyes burned. She let go. The bounty hunter crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Ethan exhaled. So, the bastard survived. Zuran turned to him. Then we finish what we started. Ethan grinned. Now that's a plan I can get behind. They stole a ship that night, and with it, they set course for their next target. The war against the ringmasters had begun. A new beginning. The stolen ship streaked through the cold void of space, leaving the dust-covered trading post far behind. Inside, Ethan sat at the control panel, watching the holographic star map flicker with data. The universe suddenly felt larger than ever before. Zuran stood beside him, her golden eyes fixed on the swirling nebula outside the viewport. The stars reflected in her gaze, but Ethan could tell she wasn't admiring them. She was thinking, planning, and preparing for a war neither of them had expected to fight. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right," he muttered, zooming in on the map. "We need a plan." Zuran didn't look away from the stars. "I already have one." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, do tell." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "We need allies." Ethan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "That's going to be a problem, considering we just pissed off one of the most powerful criminal networks in the galaxy." Zuran tilted her head, "Which is why we must find those who also wish to see them fall." Ethan frowned, rubbing his chin. She wasn't wrong. The ringmasters had enslaved, tortured, and destroyed entire species for entertainment. They had enemies, but most were either too scattered, too broken, or too afraid to fight back. They needed to change that. Ethan zoomed in on the star map. "There are a few places we can start." Zuran leaned over, studying the holographic projection. Ethan pointed to a distant system on the edge of controlled space, the Junker clans. "They deal in stolen tech and black market ships. If we want better firepower, we go there." He shifted the map. The Ghost Fleet, a rogue faction of ex-military pilots who deserted after the war. If they're still out there, we might be able to convince them to help. Finally, he pointed to a dead, gray planet far from any populated worlds. "And this place, Darkhold, the last known location of a ringmaster stronghold. If we want answers, that's where we'll find them." Zuran studied the map, then looked at Ethan. "We go to Darkhold." Ethan blinked. "Wait, hold on. You're sure? I mean, maybe we should." Zuran's gaze hardened. "If we are to fight them, we must understand them. And if we wait too long, they will strike first." Ethan sighed, shaking his head. "Yeah, all right. Straight into the fire. Why not?" He punched in the coordinates, setting course for Darkhold. The ship hummed as it shifted into hyperdrive, the stars stretching into infinite streaks of light. The hunt was on. The dead planet. Darkhold was a graveyard. As their ship dropped out of hyperspace, Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. The planet below was a gray wasteland, covered in swirling dust storms and jagged mountains. But it wasn't the landscape that unsettled him. It was the wreckage. Ruined ships floated in orbit, their twisted remains drifting aimlessly through the void. Some were massive warships, long abandoned, their hulls cracked open like broken bones. Others were smaller, transports, freighters, even a few escape pods that had never made it to the surface. Zuran stared at the wreckage, her jaw tightening. "This was not just a base," she murmured. "It was a battlefield." Ethan checked the scanners. "I'm picking up faint energy signatures down there. Someone, or something, is still alive." Zuran nodded. "Then we land." Echoes of the past. The ship touched down on the barren surface, dust swirling in thick clouds around them. Ethan grabbed a blaster from the weapons rack, checking the power levels. Zuran, however, took nothing. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "No weapon." She looked at him. "I am the weapon." Ethan exhaled. "Right. Forgot about that. They stepped out onto the planet's surface. The wind howled through the ruins of a long-abandoned settlement. The buildings, if they could still be called that, were crumbling structures of metal and stone, their walls scarred with blaster fire. It was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan's grip tightened on his blaster. I don't like this. Zuran scanned the surroundings, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. There is something here, something hidden. They moved carefully through the ruins, their footsteps muffled by the dust-covered ground. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, alien writing Ethan didn't recognize. Zuran, however, did. Her fingers traced the markings, her expression unreadable. This is the language of my people. Ethan blinked. Wait, what? She turned to him. They were here. My kind was here. Ethan felt a wave of unease. Then where are they now? Zuran didn't answer, because at that moment, something moved in the shadows. A figure emerged from the darkness, their body covered in tattered robes. Their face was hidden behind a cracked metal mask, but Ethan could see their eyes, glowing gold, just like Zuran's. Ethan's breath caught. Holy shit. Zuran took a step forward. The masked figure raised a hand. A pulse of energy shot through the air, knocking Ethan off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his vision spinning. Zuran, however, barely moved. The masked figure studied her. Then, in a voice that sent chills through the air, they whispered, "You are not the only one." Ethan pushed himself up, coughing. Zuran, what the hell is happening?" Zuran didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked onto the stranger, her breath shallow. "Who are you?" she whispered. The masked figure hesitated. Then, slowly, they reached up and removed their mask. A woman stood before them, tall, regal, her dark blue skin streaked with scars. Her golden eyes, identical to Zuran's, burned with something ancient. "I am the last," she said softly, "or at least I thought I was." Zuran's hands trembled. "You are one of my kind." The woman nodded. "And you," she said, "are the key to everything." Ethan groaned, rubbing his temples. "Great. More mysteries. Just what we needed." Zuran ignored him, stepping closer. "What do you mean?" The woman's expression darkened. "The ringmasters did not just enslave our people. They took something from us, something powerful. And if they find you, they will finish what they started." Ethan felt a pit form in his stomach. "They're already looking for her," he said. The woman exhaled slowly. "Then you are already too late." A distant boom echoed through the ruins. Ethan turned, his heart hammering. The horizon lit up with fire. Ships, dozens of them, descending from the sky, their engines glowing red. The ringmasters had found them. Zuran's golden eyes burned. "Then we end this," she said. The war had begun.